You sent an email pretending to be me? Danielle, it's not what you think. I can explain. No, explain why my contract was in your room. I was trying to help. Help who?
It's not what you think.
Funny, I think I finally understand exactly what this is.
And at that exact moment, thousands of miles away, a company waiting for Danielle's response had no idea someone else was already trying to take her place. Danielle had not grown up believing the world owed her a single thing. Her mother, Carol Ellis, had made absolutely sure of that. Carol was a second-grade teacher in Charlotte, North Carolina, the kind of teacher students came back to visit 10 years after graduation, not because she was easy on them, but because she was honest, in a way that nobody else in their lives had been willing to be. She packed Danielle's school lunch every morning with a handwritten note tucked under the sandwich. Not inspirational quotes copied from the internet. Practical ones, written in Carol's looping, slightly chaotic handwriting on torn notepad paper. Things like, "Nobody is coming to save you, baby. Be the one who shows up. Or cry in the morning if you need to. By noon, get back to work." Or, on one particularly memorable Tuesday, "You are smarter than you think and more capable than you are acting. Fix your attitude and finish the project." And if you love stories about ambition, betrayal, power, and the kind of slow-burn connection that changes people quietly and completely, then welcome to AfroSeoul Desires. Subscribe, like, and drop your thoughts in the comments as we go, because this story, it's unforgettable. Now, let's get into it. Danielle had kept every single one of those notes in a shoebox under her bed. Carol died of a stroke when Danielle was 17, on a Wednesday afternoon in October, and everything that had held its shape in the Ellis household rearranged itself in ways that could not be undone. Her father, Robert Ellis, was a decent man in most of the ways that counted. He worked his post office route without complaint, came home for dinner, showed up to Danielle's school events even when he was tired, and loved his daughter in the steady, unspectacular way of a man who showed affection through presence rather than words. But Robert Ellis was also, and this was something Danielle had understood since she was small, completely incapable of sitting with grief. He didn't know what to do with it. He needed somewhere to put it, something to organize his days around, something that looked like forward motion even when it wasn't. So he found that in a woman named Sabrina, who came into their lives 11 months after the funeral. Sabrina was warm in the practiced way of someone who understood how warmth worked as a strategy. She cooked elaborate Sunday dinners. She complimented everything Robert said. She made the house feel managed, which was what Robert needed more than anything, and she was smart enough to know it. She had a daughter of her own named Kiara, 24 at the time, and the two of them moved through the household like a unit, always slightly coordinated, always slightly ahead of any conversation that might become inconvenient. Kiara was pretty in a conventional, immediately noticeable way. She laughed loudly and warmly, and filled rooms with an easy energy that made strangers like her before they knew anything about her. She borrowed things and forgot to return them. She had started 3 different business ideas in 4 years, each announced with enormous enthusiasm and abandoned within months. She had a natural magnetism that was genuinely useful in some situations and genuinely dangerous in others. And behind her always was Sabrina, quietly ensuring that whatever Kiara wanted, Kiara found a way to reach. Danielle watched all of this from a deliberate distance. She didn't pick fights. She didn't say things to her father that would have forced him to choose, because she already knew what that choice would cost everyone. She had learned, after her mother died, that making yourself smaller was sometimes the most strategic thing you could do. Not because you deserved a smaller space, but because you were building towards something, and drama was expensive. She invested her energy into what she could actually control, her work, her studies, the slow and patient construction of a future she could see clearly, even when nobody around her could. She left for college 6 months after Sabrina moved her wardrobe into the master bedroom. She told herself it was for school. She knew the other part of the truth. She was leaving before the house became completely unrecognizable, while she could still walk out with her version of it intact. The idea for DLE Creative Group was born in the university library during her junior year, at 1 a.m., on a Tuesday, when she was supposed to be reviewing marketing case studies and instead found herself sketching the bones of something she couldn't find anywhere in the assigned readings. She named it after her own initials because her mother had always said to put your name on your work, that hiding behind a generic company name was just a way of pre-apologizing for yourself. It was a consulting firm, a boutique brand strategy and creative direction firm built specifically to help Black-owned businesses break into international markets. Not the enormous corporations that already had the infrastructure and the capital and the access. The ones that were one good partnership away from something significant, but didn't know how to navigate the language barrier, the cultural distance, the daunting machinery of international business, relationships, the kind of firm that would have helped Patrice, who had been making the most beautiful handmade soy candles for 15 years, and had a product that belonged in every boutique hotel in Europe, but had spent 3 years getting nothing back from emails she'd sent into the void. The kind of firm that looked at someone with a brilliant product and a limited network and said, "We see exactly what you have. Let us show you how to make the world see it too." She graduated with honors, moved into a small studio apartment in uptown Charlotte, and turned her dining table into a desk immediately, permanently, and without a single moment of regret. The first year was freelance brand work, small clients, modest fees, a portfolio that grew slowly but was always stronger than the price tag suggested. By the end of year 1, she had 7 projects and 3 returning clients. By the end of year 2, she had something that looked and felt and operated like a real business. The pivot happened on a Sunday afternoon when she was reading a small trade publication and came across a feature about emerging Korean conglomerates looking to expand their creative and brand partnerships in North America. KDJ Group was mentioned specifically. A Seoul-based conglomerate with interests in fashion retail, boutique hospitality, and digital media, led by its youngest ever CEO, a 36-year-old named Park Do-jin, who had reportedly restructured the entire group's international strategy in under 2 years. The journalist described him as someone who combined the aggression of a disruptor with the precision of an architect. Danielle read that sentence twice. Then she put the magazine down, opened her laptop, and started drafting. It took 6 months to find the right entry point into KDJ's orbit. She researched the company until she understood their North American strategy better than some of the people currently implementing it. She identified the specific gaps. Cultural translation errors in their marketing collateral. Brand positioning that read as foreign in ways that could be corrected with the right guidance. Partnership opportunities they were walking past because they didn't know which doors to knock on. She sent her proposal through every legitimate channel she could find, following up with exactly the right amount of persistence, enough to be remembered but not so much as to be dismissed. The response was not a rejection. It was a request for a formal pitch meeting in New York with KDJ's International Partnerships Division. She flew to New York on a budget airline, carry-on only, and wore a deep burgundy blazer that her mother would have loved completely. She sat across from 3 people who watched her with the careful attention of executives still deciding whether this pitch was worth their time. She gave the pitch of her life, not because she was performing, but because she knew the material cold and believed in it completely, and there is no substitute for those 2 things in the same room at the same time. 2 weeks after she flew back to Charlotte, the confirmation email arrived. KDJ Group was offering DLE Creative Group a formal partnership contract. A 12-month creative and brand strategy consultancy covering KDJ's North American retail expansion, with a starting value of $280,000 and a performance-based renewal clause built in for strong results. She read it 4 times. She put her hands flat on the wood of that dining table, that was never a dining table, and breathed and let herself feel the full size of what had just happened. Then she made the mistake of going home. She arrived Saturday afternoon. Sabrina was in the kitchen arranging things with the focused energy of a woman who had made domesticity into a performance. Kiara was on the couch, feet tucked under her, looking up at Danielle with the easy warmth she switched on whenever she wanted to seem unbothered. Robert was in the backyard, his Saturday habitat regardless of season. Danielle sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, finishing a few notes on the contract details. The confirmation email was on the screen. The subject line was visible. She wasn't trying to hide it. She was in her father's house, at his kitchen table, and she had not yet built the specific reflex of protecting her work from the people she shared a last name with. Sabrina appeared behind her with a glass of lemonade. "Is that from the Korean company you mentioned?" The subject line was right there. "Yes, ma'am." Sabrina leaned in before Danielle could do anything about it, her eyes moving across the email with a speed that was reading, not glancing. "Oh my goodness, is that real? 200 and Danielle, that is incredible. Robert, come inside. Your daughter has some news." Robert came in from the backyard with his work gloves still on, and a face that went warm and proud the second he read the email over Danielle's shoulder. "That's my girl." He squeezed her shoulder, and for one true moment the kitchen felt like something it used to be. Kiara appeared in the doorway. "What happened?" Danielle's big partnership came through. Robert's voice was full. "The Korean company, 200 and Dad, gentle." The figures were already out, but Danielle didn't need more of them in the air. Kiara's eyebrows lifted. "Seriously?" "Danielle, that's amazing." She smiled her warm, immediate smile, and at the time Danielle took it at face value, because what else do you do with a smile from someone standing in your father's kitchen? She printed a copy of the confirmation. She was meticulous about physical copies, always had been, a habit from her mother who believed that anything existing only on a screen was one technical failure away from disappearing. She left the printout on the kitchen table and went upstairs to wash up before dinner. She was gone 20 minutes. When she came back down, Sabrina was at the stove. Robert had returned to the backyard. Kiara was not in the kitchen, not in the living room, and the paper was gone. Danielle checked everything twice. Her folder, her laptop bag, both pockets of her blazer, between the pages of the magazine on the counter. She went through it all with the focused calm of someone who already knows the answer but needs to finish the checklist before she can allow herself to know it fully. She stood at the bottom of the stairs for a long moment. Then she went up. She knocked on Kiara's door. The sound of a phone call ending. A beat of silence. Kiara opened the door with the carefully composed expression of someone who had been arranging it on the way to the handle. On the desk behind her, clearly visible and not even turned face down, was the printout. "That's my document, on your desk." Kiara looked behind her, then back. "I was just looking at it. I was just curious." "Give it back." Kiara gave it back, holding it out with an expression hard to be apologetic and landing somewhere closer to embarrassed. Danielle took it. She looked at Kiara for one moment, not with anger, just with the clarity of a woman cataloging something she would not forget. Then she walked back downstairs. She sat through dinner. She listened to her father talk about the tomato plants in the backyard. She watched Sabrina move through the kitchen with her usual smooth efficiency, refilling glasses without being asked, steering conversation with the gentle precision of someone who had done it so many times it no longer required thought. Kiara was quiet. Danielle kept the document in her bag with her hand resting on it under the table. She drove home that night telling herself it was over, that Kiara had been nosy and nothing more. She woke up Monday morning and found the email from KDJ's International Partnerships Division waiting in her inbox. The email was politely worded in the specific way of corporate communication that has been reviewed by legal before sending. It stated that following a message received over the weekend from a representative of DLE Creative Group indicating a personnel change and updated contact information, KDJ's records had been adjusted accordingly. The company wished to confirm with Ms. Danielle Ellis whether she remained the authorized representative, as they had received correspondence from a Ms. Kiara Ellis claiming to represent the firm going forward. Danielle read the email, set her coffee down, read it again. She called the KDJ Partnerships contact directly. It took 40 minutes to understand the full picture. Kiara had used the information from the printed document, the contact details, the project reference number, the firm name, to send an email over the weekend claiming to be a co-founder of DLE, Creative Group, and positioning herself as the new lead contact. She had cited internal restructuring as the reason for the change. What Danielle understood later, turning it over in the quiet of her apartment, was that Kiara had not done this alone. Someone had made sure Robert was occupied in the backyard after the printout was left on the table. Someone had kept the kitchen conversation moving in exactly the right direction during dinner, ensuring nothing was noticed too soon. Sabrina had been the architecture of it. Kiara had simply walked through the door her mother built. The KDJ representative was apologetic. He confirmed nothing had been formally processed. He confirmed Danielle's founder status was on record. He said they would review internally and follow up. They followed up 4 days later. The email said that given complications around communication and representation clarity, KDJ Group had decided to pause the partnership pending an internal review. They thanked Ms. Ellis for her time. They appreciated the quality of her proposal. The review never came. The contract that had taken 2 years to build was gone in 72 hours. She called her father once, calmly, and told him everything without drama or accusation beyond the plain facts. He was quiet on the line with the silence of a man who understood more than he wanted to. He said he was sorry. He said he would speak to Sabrina. He said it in the tone of a man who already knew those words were not enough and simply didn't have better ones. "I know, Dad. I just needed you to know." She hung up and sat at her table, not crying yet, just letting the full weight of it settle. She thought about the burgundy blazer and the New York meeting and the 4 times she'd read that confirmation email before she let herself feel it. She thought about the note she had been drafting to send her mother's friend Mrs. Patrice. "It's happening. The firm is real. We can help your candle brand now." She hadn't sent it yet. She sat with all of it for exactly as long as she needed. Then she opened a new document and started working out what came next. Nobody was coming to save her. She was the one who showed up. She had not spent 2 years building something real, only to let someone else's hands stop it from going any further. The decision to move to Seoul came 14 months later, and it was not emotional. It was strategic. She kept DLE operating through the lost contract by returning to solid freelance work while she thought through the larger picture. She took on 3 new clients and did excellent work for all of them, because doing poor work as a function of being hurt about something unrelated was a form of self-sabotage she refused to engage. She spent 4 months doing the kind of research that most people find exhausting and that Danielle found clarifying. She studied Seoul's market comprehensively. She studied what the Korean wave had done to the global appetite for Korean brands, and what those brands needed now that the appetite was there. She identified the specific gap. There was no one in Seoul doing exactly what she did, bridging Korean brand identity with Western market strategy, with real knowledge of both sides. She was exactly that person, and Seoul didn't know it yet. She got her business visa processed correctly and entirely on her own this time. She found a shared office space in Mapogu through a startup networking group she'd joined online. She found a furnished apartment in Yongsan-gu. She sold the dining table because she was getting a proper desk instead. She landed in Seoul on a Tuesday morning in October with 2 suitcases, a laptop, and the particular brand of stubbornness that is indistinguishable from faith when it is actually working. Her Korean was functional. She'd studied it for 14 months with the same preparation she brought to everything, which meant that by the time she landed she could hold a basic business conversation, read a menu with mostly correct interpretations, and apologize gracefully. She did the latter frequently in those first months, and people seemed to appreciate it far more than her correct grammar. There was something about a person willing to be imperfect in public that made people trust her faster than credentials alone would have managed. The first year in Seoul was hard in the particular way that genuine beginnings are always hard. There are no shortcuts in relationship building, and Seoul's business culture was a place where shortcuts were noticed immediately, filed quietly away, and not forgotten. She got her first client through the networking group, a Korean's accessories brand with a beautiful product line and a website that was actively working against them in the American market. She spent 6 weeks on the brand strategy and delivered something that turned their North American digital traffic around within 90 days. That client told 3 people. One of those 3 became her second client. This was how it worked. This was how it had always worked. Jiyeon arrived in the 3rd month of Danielle's 2nd year in Seoul, referred by the accessories brand, introducing herself as a business coach who specialized in working with foreign-born entrepreneurs navigating the Korean market. She was 5 feet 2 inches tall, wore exclusively structured blazers in jewel tones, and communicated in sentences efficient in the way of someone who had decided long ago that words were tools and tools should not be wasted. Within the first 20 minutes of their initial consultation, she had identified 4 structural vulnerabilities in DLE's local client acquisition strategy and presented clear solutions to all 4. Danielle hired her before the meeting was over. "You're not a business coach." Danielle looked at her across the table. "You're a chief of operations who just hasn't been called that yet." Jiyeon straightened her already straight blazer. "I know exactly what I am. I let clients name the role." By the end of year 3, DLE Creative Group had a real office in Yongsan-gu with her name on the door, 2 full-time employees, a waiting list of prospective clients, and a reputation that was not large but was solid in the way of things built correctly from the ground up. She had rebuilt what was taken from her, in a city nobody expected her to be in, on her own terms, without shortcuts, without apology, and without once looking back at Charlotte and wishing she'd stayed. She had, without designing it, become someone that certain people in Seoul's international business world had begun to pay attention to. She didn't know yet that one of those people was Park Do-jin. She met him on a Wednesday, which she would later think was fitting because Wednesdays are the least dramatic day of the week, and what developed between them turned out to be the opposite of undramatic. It was at a business forum hosted by the Seoul International Chamber of Commerce. The kind of event Danielle attended because Jiyeon had told her in the plainest possible terms that showing up to these things was not optional. "You can be talented alone in your office," Jiyeon had said, setting the event invitation on Danielle's desk with a finality that did not invite discussion. "Or you can be talented where people can see you. Pick one." Danielle picked. She was standing near the back of the room with a glass of sparkling water, listening to a panel on cross-cultural brand strategy and taking mental notes, when the woman beside her leaned over and whispered with the reverence of someone announcing something significant. Park Do-jin just walked in. Danielle glanced toward the entrance. He was not difficult to find in a room. He was tall in the way that simply registers across a crowd, not performed or postured, just there the way someone's eye color is just there. Broad-shouldered, in a charcoal suit that fit him with the specific ease of clothes made for the person wearing them rather than the reverse. His hair was dark and neat, swept back from his face. He moved through the room with the unhurried gravity of someone who had been the most consequential person in every room for long enough that it no longer required any thought. He was 36 years old and ran a conglomerate. He looked exactly like both of those things were simultaneously true. Danielle turned back to the panel. "Who's Park Do-jin?" She kept her tone carefully casual, the tone of someone who knew about 80% of the answer, and was curious about the remaining 20. The woman beside her turned with an expression of sincere BT Group. "He's the CEO." Ah, she knew KDJ Group. She knew it in the detailed, costly way that you know something that has taken something significant from you. She took a quiet sip of her sparkling water and told herself that Seoul was a small world and encounters like this were just geometry, nothing more. She did not, as it turned out, make it to the exit before the geometry caught up with her. The room shifted and reconfigured the way these rooms do. She had moved into a genuinely interesting exchange with a brand director from a mid-sized cosmetics company, tracking the woman's distribution challenges with real attention. When someone joined, their group and the brand director's expression rearranged itself in the specific way it rearranges when status has entered a conversation without warning. Danielle turned. Park Do-jin was standing approximately 3 feet away. He was listening to the brand director finish her sentence with a quality of attention that Danielle noticed immediately because it was not being performed. He was actually listening. Present in the room in a way that genuinely powerful people rarely are in spaces where many people want pieces of their attention at once. "This is Danielle Ellis," the brand director offered, because the moment required a bridge. She runs DLE Creative Group, Brand Strategy, International Markets. Park Do-jin turned toward her. He had a face that was good in the way of things built for function rather than decoration. Angular, composed, with dark eyes that were direct and had the quality of someone who had made a decision, at some point, to always say what he meant and to expect the same from the people around him. Dell Creative Group. His English was confident and precise, the accent giving it a texture that was its own thing entirely. Yongsan-gu. She had not expected that detail. "You know it? We reviewed your portfolio when we were restructuring our North American strategy about a year ago. The work you did on the Hanso accessories rebranding was flagged by our team. That was one of our earlier Seoul projects. I'm glad it reached you. We almost worked together, at some point. I believe there was a proposal years back." Something moved through her chest. Not anger, it had been too long for anger, but something sharper and more complicated than nothing. There was a contract 5 years ago, not just a proposal, a confirmation. His eyebrows moved, slightly and briefly. He was recalibrating. 5 years. The North American Expansion Partnership. We had a signed confirmation in hand. Then there were complications on the representation side, and KDJ passed. He was quiet for a moment, something working behind his eyes. "I remember that file. There was a communication issue, unauthorized contact if I recall." "That's accurate." She kept her voice even. "It resolved itself eventually. I rebuilt. I'm here." She made a small gesture that compressed the office in Yongsan-gu and the 3 years and the whole of Seoul and the last 5 years into one quiet movement. The brand director, with genuinely excellent social awareness, discovered she needed to speak with someone across the room. "What happened after?" he asked, when it was just the two of them. She could have given him the professional version, the edited one she used at panels. She wasn't sure why she didn't. Maybe it was the quality of his attention. Maybe it was that he was asking about her specifically, not about DLE as a brand narrative. "I rebuilt. Different city, same idea. It took time. It worked. That must have been significant." The loss, it was significant. It was also not the end of the story, which is the part I try to stay focused on. He held her gaze for a moment with the expression of someone whose interior conclusion has just been confirmed. That's not a common quality. The ability to hold on to that part specifically. My mother gave it to me. She hadn't meant to say that. It came out the way true things sometimes do when you're not managing yourself carefully enough. She sounds like someone worth knowing. She was the best person I've ever met. And I've met some good people. They stood with that for a moment, not awkwardly. Just in the way that conversations touching on people who are no longer present tend to settle into their own particular quiet. I'd like to hear more about DLE's current work, if your schedule allows something this week. He called the office on Friday, not an email, a call. Ji-yeon answered and reported the fact with her composure entirely intact, and her eyes doing something slightly different from her usual expression. Park Do-jin's office called. She set a post-it note on Danielle's desk. He'd like to schedule a meeting. What kind of meeting? The kind where they said his name with a certain tone, and I said of course absolutely before they had finished the full sentence. Ji-yeon straightened the post-it, which was already straight. Tuesday 2 p.m. KDJ Tower. Wear the navy blazer. I was going to wear the green one, the navy. The finality in Ji-yeon's voice ended the discussion completely. Danielle wore the navy. The meeting was scheduled for 45 minutes. It ran 2.5 hours, and she was not the one who let it go long. Park Do-jin was not a sympathy gesture kind of person. She had gathered that much from their conversation at the forum. He came to the meeting with her portfolio already reviewed in detail. Questions that were specific and pointed in ways that required genuine preparation, and a structural understanding of what DLE, creative group, actually did that took some people 3 or 4 conversations to develop. He also came with a proposal laid out and ready. KDJ was in the middle of a significant expansion. New retail concepts in 3 North American cities, a digital brand repositioning for 2 existing lines, a partnership with American lifestyle brands that needed someone who understood how to move fluidly between Korean brand identity and Western consumer expectations without losing the integrity of either side. He wanted DLE Creative Group as the lead consultancy, not a pilot engagement, the full scope of it structured properly and compensated accordingly. Danielle sat across from him in the conference room on the 31st floor and absorbed this information with the stillness that comes not from being unmoved, but from the practical need to keep her face arranged appropriately while her mind ran very quickly through a very large number of things at once. Danielle set her pen down. You're aware that this is essentially the contract that should have existed 5 years ago. I'm aware, and you're not offering it because of that. No hesitation at all. I'm offering it because your portfolio is the best match for this project, and your market knowledge is precisely what this expansion needs. The timing is what it is. The work is the reason. She studied him for a moment. Why the meeting before the formal proposal? You could have emailed the brief directly. He was quiet for exactly 1 beat. His answers, they were given the time they needed, which was different. I wanted to understand who I was dealing with before I put something formal on the table. After the forum, I thought you were someone worth understanding before the business started. Danielle looked at him across the conference table. That's a reasonable approach. The corners of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, but the thing that comes before one. I thought you'd appreciate it. Don't be too pleased with yourself about that. I'm not completely flat. The tone of a man who was, in fact, very slightly pleased with himself. Ji-yeon reviewed the engagement agreement clause by clause and emerged satisfied in the calm way of someone who had not expected to find anything wrong and was confirming she had been correct. The contract was signed 2 weeks after the meeting. It was, by any reasonable measure, exactly what the first one should have been 5 years earlier, except better, because Danielle was better now, and the terms reflected that. They worked together for 3 months before anything shifted between them, so gradual that Danielle didn't fully recognize it until a Thursday evening when they were both still at the conference table at nearly 8 o'clock, because a launch timeline had needed restructuring, and neither of them had suggested stopping, and she looked up from her laptop and found him watching her. That had nothing at all to do with brand strategy. She gave it about 11 seconds. What? Nothing. But he didn't look away. Do-jin, you've been on that same slide for almost 20 minutes. I'm thinking. You think in that posture specifically, I've noticed. She looked back at her laptop. Outside the window, Seoul moved through the dark the way Seoul does, with complete indifference to whatever might be happening inside any particular building at any particular hour. It's getting late. It is. We should probably wrap up. Danielle, she looked up. He was still watching her with that expression. Would you like to get dinner? It was not quite a question. She had learned that about him over 3 months. When something actually mattered to him, he didn't dress it up or make it smaller than it was. She closed her laptop. I would. They had dinner at a small restaurant in Hanamdong that Park Do-jin apparently used when he didn't want to be somewhere he'd be recognized. Low-lit, genuinely unpretentious, with galbi that knew what it was doing and a doenjang jjigae that Danielle had been quietly thinking about since the reservation was made. It was, Compared to the professional register of everything that had come before it, startlingly easy. He told her about his family, about growing up as the eldest son of a man who had built KDJ from a modest trading company, and the particular weight that comes with inheriting something other people constructed before you were old enough to have opinions about it. He told it matter-of-factly, without complaint, which she recognized as a specific kind of discipline that is harder than it looks. She told him about Charlotte, about her mother's notes on torn notepad paper, about the burgundy blazer she'd worn to the New York pitch meeting, and the dining table that became her desks and stayed that way for years, about leaving her father's house after the remarriage and the particular loneliness of building something enormous in an apartment where the only person who knew what you were trying to do was you. She told him about Sabrina and Kiara the way she'd learned to tell it over the years, as a chapter that had closed, not a wound still open. He listened the way he always listened, like what she was saying was the most important thing in the room. Not because he was performing that quality, but because he had decided it was true and behaved accordingly. "Do you ever wonder," he asked, turning his glass slowly, "how differently things would have gone if the contract hadn't been interfered with?" She thought about it honestly, because she always thought about things honestly when he asked them, constantly, and then I remember I wouldn't be here. He looked at her. "If KDJ had worked with me in Charlotte 5 years ago, I would have done good work and moved on to the next thing. I wouldn't have come to Seoul. I wouldn't have spent 3 years learning this market from the inside, building relationships nobody could hand me, understanding things about Korean brand culture." She set her glass down. "I might have been more successful faster, but I would have been a different kind of successful, less prepared, considerably less." He was quiet for a moment. "The person who intercepted the contract, your family, my stepsister, and my stepmother behind her, Kiara did the thing. Sabrina built the conditions that made it possible." She had come to understand this clearly over time, the way Sabrina had maneuvered Robert out of the room, kept the dinner conversation smooth, created the window that Kiara walked through. They worked as a team. They always did. Do you know what happened to them? She did, through her father's Sunday phone calls. Kiara's attempt to run the KDJ partnership had gone exactly as predictably as anyone paying attention might have expected. She had apparently sent KDJ a follow-up email that Ji-yeon, upon hearing a description of it, had called possibly the most optimistic correspondence ever written by someone with no relevant qualifications. KDJ had not responded and closed the file. Kiara was back in Charlotte within 6 weeks. Sabrina and Robert were still married. Life had continued in its ordinary, slightly adjusted shape. "They're fine. It didn't work the way they thought it would, but they're fine. You're not angry." I was. For a long time I was angry in a way that lived in my body. And then at some point it stopped being useful, and I stopped carrying it, because I am not interested in things that stop being useful. He looked at her with the particular expression she had started to learn, the one he used when something landed exactly where he'd already expected it to. "You're a very specific kind of person. Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation. The compliment is that I mean it entirely positively." She laughed, a real one, sudden enough that she didn't get to shape it into something more composed. He looked at her with the contained, genuine satisfaction of a man who understood the value of making someone laugh honestly and did not take that lightly. "You're somewhat pleased with yourself right now, only slightly." "I try to keep it reasonable. How's that going?" "Better than average," he replied, with such perfect straightness that it made her laugh again, and this time he let himself smile properly, and it changed his whole face in a way that she filed away without meaning to, and did not forget. They were careful about it, because they were both careful people, and had each been educated by experience in the cost of moving without thinking first. Ji-yeon was informed because Ji-yeon needed to be informed to do her job properly. Ji-yeon's response was to sit Danielle down, review the engagement contract in full, confirm that DLE's terms were entirely independent of anything personal, and then produce exactly 3 words. She was satisfied. Good. Contract solid. Then she went back to her desk and said nothing further about it, which was the most professional thing Danielle had ever witnessed. What developed between Danielle and Park Do-jin happened in the good places. Sunday mornings at Gyeongbong, when the early light came in at an angle that made the whole palace look like something out of a painting. An afternoon at Namdaemun Market, where she was looking for a specific weight of linen, and he was so comprehensively out of his element that he stopped trying to pretend otherwise within the first 10 minutes, which she found genuinely endearing. "You're not helpful at this," she told him, watching him hold up a bolt of fabric with the expression of a man encountering an entirely unfamiliar classification system. "I run a conglomerate. I have procurement teams for material sourcing. You don't have a procurement team right now. That is a temporary condition I intend to address." "What are you looking at right now?" He looked at the fabric in his hands, a pause that lasted just slightly too long. "Fabric, more specific." Another pause. "Light fabric. It is a medium-weight linen. It reads lighter because of the weave structure." She held it up so it caught the light from the market ceiling. "See how it moves without going limp?" He looked at the fabric, then at her. In the way he had of appearing to examine the thing in front of him, while actually observing something else entirely. "I see it. You're not looking at the linen." "No," he agreed without any particular embarrassment about it. She lowered the fabric. He had the expression of a man who had decided something some time ago and was now simply waiting for the right moment to say so. She bought the linen, and they walked back through the market, and neither of them said anything about it, which was its own kind of saying something. The moment it became something neither of them could call professional happened on a Saturday afternoon in March, 4 months into the partnership. They were walking along the Han River. It was cool and clear, one of those Seoul afternoons where the city feels simultaneously enormous and entirely human. They'd been talking about the North American expansion, and then about something she'd read, and then about nothing in particular, which had become its own comfortable kind of conversation between them. A stretch of quiet settled in. "I've been thinking about the Portland rollout timing, about you." She kept her eyes on the river. "That sounds like the beginning of something that complicates things." "I don't intend to complicate things. I intend to be straightforward, which I've come to understand is what you prefer." "It is. And I also reserve the right to be slightly nervous about what straightforward sounds like in this specific moment." He stopped walking. She stopped because he did. He turned to look at her with the direct, unperforming look he brought to everything that actually mattered to him. "I think about you outside of work. I think about the things you say, and the way you approach problems, and the fact that you rebuilt an entire firm from nothing in a city you didn't grow up in, after something that would have ended most people's attempts before they properly started. I think about the particular way you laugh when something actually catches you off guard." He looked at her steadily. "I haven't wanted to say something like this to anyone in a long time. I wanted you to know." The river moved past them. Danielle looked at him. "Outside of work." "Okay." She waited. "That's it? Just okay?" "That's all I needed to know." She looked at him for a moment with the expression of a woman who had been preparing for a considerably more complicated conversation. "You're somewhat maddening. You've mentioned that before. I have not actually said those words to you before." "No, but you thought it very clearly after our second meeting. Your expression was quite readable. My expression was professional. Your expression was professional and also very readable at the same time." She looked at him. Then she laughed, a real one, the kind that gets away from you before you can shape it. He looked at her with the quiet, genuine warmth of a man who did not take lightly the fact that he had made her laugh honestly, and who understood, without needing it explained, what that particular kind of moment was worth. She looked back at the river. A quiet beat. "Okay." 3 months after that afternoon on the Han River, Kiara Ellis called. Danielle was at her desk eating lunch, a habit Ji-yeon disapproved of and had given up fighting months ago. when the Charlotte number appeared on her phone screen. She recognized it before she could have explained why. She looked at it for a moment. Then she answered, "Danielle." Kiara's voice was different from every version of it that Danielle remembered. Something had gone quiet in it. Something that used to be easy and loud, and a little careless had been replaced by something smaller and more deliberate. "I've been trying to call for months. I kept starting and then not finishing. Kiara, I'm sorry, it came out plain without decoration. I know that doesn't undo anything. I know sorry isn't the thing that fixes it, but I have been for a long time and I kept not saying it directly, and that was its own kind of cowardice on top of everything else." Danielle looked out her Yongsan-gu window at Seoul. "I know you are. I've known for a while." A breath on the other end of the line. "I thought you hated me." "I don't hate you, Kiara. I was angry. I had every right to be angry. I was hurt and I spent years building something real while you were doing what you did, and there is time in there and opportunity in there that I cannot get back." She kept her voice clean and factual, not cold but not soft either. "And I also know you were 24, and you were your mother's daughter, and you made a decision you weren't equipped for, and you've lived with knowing that every day since." "I can hold both of those things at the same time." Silence. "I'm working at a marketing agency now, entry level. I'm actually learning. Like actually this time, not like before." "That's good. I mean that genuinely. I'm not calling to ask for anything. I just wanted you to know that I've been watching what you built and Kiara's voice went quieter. "I'm proud of you. I know that probably sounds ridiculous coming from me. It doesn't. It probably should. Kiara." A pause, warm but firm. "Build something that's yours. Something you built yourself from the beginning. There's nothing like it." She hung up, set her phone beside her lunch, and sat quietly for a moment with the Seoul skyline filling the window. Ji-yeon came in 4 minutes later with a cup of green tea and set it down on the desk without a word, which was its own complete and sufficient response to everything. The North American expansion launched in October and performed well by every measure that mattered. DLE's brand positioning strategy for KDJ's Charlotte, Chicago, and Los Angeles markets was covered by 2 trade publications within the first month. 3 Korean brands reached out to Danielle's office within 60 days of the launch results going public. Ji-yeon promoted herself to Chief of Operations, and Danielle approved it in the time it took to look up from her laptop and say yes. Robert Ellis flew to Seoul in November, his first international trip. He arrived at Incheon carrying a bag that was slightly too large for a week, and wearing the expression of a man who was excited and planned to deny it under any circumstances. He stood in the Yongsan-gu office with his hands in his coat pockets and looked at everything slowly, the name on the door, the framed copy of DLE's first pleat suggested mounting the wall, that Ji-yeon had suggested mounting on the wall. "Your mother would have—" "I know, Dad." He nodded. He looked at the window for a moment. "I'm sorry, about Sabrina. About what happened back then. I should have done more than I did. You did what you could with what you had." She put her hand on his arm. "And you're here now, that matters." He stayed a week. She took him to Gyeongbokgung on a clear Tuesday morning when the light was doing everything Seoul light does in November, that particular quality of gold and distance that makes a person feel like they're standing inside a memory while it's still forming. He walked through the palace grounds with his hands in his pockets, and the expression of a man feeling something large and not having the language for it yet. She told him about her mother that morning, told him about the notes in the lunchbox, the shoebox under her bed, the practical handwriting on torn notepad paper. He cried quietly for a little while. She held his arm and let him, and didn't say anything, because sometimes the most useful thing is simply to stay. He met Park Do-jin over dinner at the Hanam Dong restaurant that same week. The 2 men shook hands and exchanged the brief, measuring look of men deciding what they think of each other, and within approximately 8 minutes had discovered a shared and apparently profound interest in garden maintenance. The conversation moved to raised beds versus traditional rows, the correct soil pH for tomatoes in variable climates, and the specific problem of planting basil near fennel, none of which Danielle had any strong opinions about, and all of which occupied the two of them for the better part of an hour, while she sat at the table and watched with a degree of delight she had not anticipated. On the walk back afterward, Park Do-jin turned to her. "Your father has excellent instincts about soil preparation. I'll let him know he's contributed meaningfully to the KDJ estate garden. He's solved a problem I've had for 2 growing seasons. He will be genuinely delighted to hear that. He should be." The fennel issue was serious. She looked at him sideways. He was walking with the slightly satisfied expression of a man who had made a new friend and was not going to make a big thing of it, which somehow made the whole thing funnier. She was still smiling about it when they said goodnight, and still thinking about it when she got home, and she thought about it the next morning, with the particular warmth of something that had been exactly what it was supposed to be without anyone planning for it. The profile ran on a Thursday morning in the 3rd week of March. Danielle was at her desk at 7 with coffee and a new client contract when Ji-yeon came through the door 8 minutes earlier than usual, which was, for Ji-yeon, practically arriving the night before. She held up her phone without saying a word first. The Seoul business publication, full feature, her name in the headline, "The American Consultant Who Cracked the Korean Market." Danielle took the phone. "Read it once." Set it down on her desk, picked it up and read it again. The piece was thorough and accurate and generous without being excessive. It covered DLE's founding, the move to Seoul, the trajectory of the firm, the KDJ partnership results. It mentioned briefly, without names or specifics, that the company had been built after a significant early professional setback that would have stopped most careers before they properly started. The journalist had asked about it, and Danielle had given her the version that was true without belonging to the public. Just the plain fact of it, a contract was lost. Everything was rebuilt. The rebuilding produced something better than what was lost. She set the phone down. She thought about the burgundy blazer she had worn to New York and the dining table that became her desk. She thought about the printed copy she'd left on the kitchen table while she went upstairs, and the 72 hours that had dismantled 2 years of careful work. She thought about landing at Incheon on a Tuesday morning in October, with 2 suitcases and stubbornness and nothing else. She thought about her mother's handwriting on torn notepad paper. "Nobody is coming to save you, baby. Be the one who shows up." She had shown up. She had kept showing up. She was still showing up. Her phone buzzed on the desk. Park Do-jin saw the article. "It's accurate, so are you. Dinner tonight, that place in Hanamdong," she typed back. "The article is accurate or I am." His response arrived before she'd set the phone down. "Both. 7:30. Bring Ji-yeon if she'll come." Ji-yeon, who had been reading over her shoulder, turned and walked back toward her desk. "I will not be coming. The contract is solid, and I intend to keep professional and personal context cleanly separated." Her jewel-toned blazer was perfectly straight. Her coffee mug was held at the precise angle of a woman who was, in her own way, entirely happy about everything. Danielle looked out her Yongsan-gu window at Seoul doing what it always did. Moving, generating, indifferent to any individual story and somehow holding all of them at once. She had not planned to love this city. She had come here because the research said it was the right move, and the logic held and the opportunity was real. But somewhere in the 3 years and the early mornings, and the difficult client conversations, and the Sunday walks through the palace grounds, and the dinners in Hanamdong, and the afternoons in Namdaemun Market where a very composed CEO did not know what he was looking at and admitted it freely, somewhere in all of that, she had ended up loving it completely and without reservation. 5 years ago, someone had lifted a piece of paper off a kitchen table in Charlotte, North Carolina, and tried to rewrite a story that was not theirs to write. What they had not understood, and what Danielle had known even then in the part of herself that held on to the things her mother had given her, was that the story did not live in the paper. It never had. It lived in the person who wrote it, and that person was here, at this desk, in this office, in this city she had chosen, in this life she had built, in this firm whose name was on the door because she had put it there herself. She picked up her pen, she opened the new client file. She got back to work, the way she always had, the way she always would. If you stayed with this story until the end, thank you for spending your time here with AfroSeoul Desires. And if Danielle's journey meant something to you, let me know in the comments. I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs the reminder that setbacks are not the end of the road. And when you're ready for another unforgettable story, your next one is already waiting for you on the screen.